It was one of those quiet Sunday afternoons when time seemed to move slower than usual. The air was warm. The scent of cut grass hung heavy, and the faint laughter of children playing down the street carried softly across the neighborhood. Evelyn sat on her porch swing, her teacup resting gently between her palms. It had been years since she'd shared this porch with anyone else. Ever since her husband passed, the porch had become her refuge, a place where she could watch life unfold without being part of it. Across the street, the house next door belonged to the Crawfords, Mark and his teenage son, Ryan. Evelyn had always thought of them as a quiet family, though she often heard raised voices in the evenings, muffled through thin walls and open windows. Mark, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, carried himself with the stiff posture of an ex-soldier, and Ryan was the kind of boy who always walked with his head down, shoulders tense as if trying to disappear into the air around him. That afternoon, as Evelyn sipped her tea, she noticed Ryan walking up her front path. It startled her. He rarely even waved when she greeted him. He hesitated at the foot of the porch steps, hands shoved into his pockets, his face pale and distant. "Hello there, Ryan," Evelyn said kindly, setting her cup down. "Everything all right?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes darted from her to the porch floorboards, then back again. "Do you mind if I sit here for a bit?" he finally asked. "Of course not," she said, motioning to the empty spot beside her. "It's a good day for company." Ryan sat down slowly, like he was afraid the swing might give way. The silence that followed was thick. The creak of the swing and the hum of cicadas filled the air between them. Evelyn could sense the tension in his movements, the way his fingers tapped against his knee, the way he avoided her gaze. After a few minutes, she tried gently, "You seem troubled, dear. Everything okay at home?" Ryan's throat worked as he swallowed hard. I didn't know who else to talk to," he murmured. That simple sentence changed everything. Evelyn's heart softened instantly. There was something in his tone, something raw and frightened. She leaned forward slightly, choosing her words with care. "You can talk to me, Ryan. Whatever it is, I promise I'll listen." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked out toward the street, his eyes distant, like he was replaying something in his mind. "It's just," he started, voice trembling. "Sometimes I wish I could just leave this place. Things aren't right at home." Before she could ask what he meant, Mark's voice echoed from across the street, sharp, commanding. "Ryan, dinner!" The boy flinched, stood abruptly, and muttered, "Thanks for listening, Mrs. Turner." Then he hurried off without looking back. Evelyn watched him go, her heart uneasy. Something in the boy's eyes, that flicker of fear and sadness, lingered long after he disappeared behind his front door. She didn't know it yet, but that brief visit was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The next few days after that brief encounter, Evelyn couldn't shake the image of Ryan's face from her mind. Those hollow eyes that looked far older than his 17 years, and that tremor in his voice when he said things weren't right at home. She had seen that kind of quiet fear before, the kind that hides beneath polite smiles and casual conversations. It lingered with her like a cold draft sneaking under the door. By Wednesday afternoon, as she watered her garden, she heard soft footsteps approaching. When she turned, Ryan stood by the fence, holding a small basket of apples. "Dad said we had too many," he said awkwardly, setting them down. Evelyn smiled. "Well, that's very kind of you. Thank your father for me." Ryan hesitated, then said softly, "He doesn't know I came." Something in his tone made her pause. She noticed the faint bruise near his wrist, the way he kept glancing back toward his house as though afraid someone might be watching. She invited him to sit on the porch again, and he accepted without protest. Over the next week, this became a pattern. Ryan would stop by after school, helping her pull weeds or carry groceries from the car. He didn't talk much at first, but Evelyn never pushed. She'd learned that some wounds only open when they feel safe enough to do so. Slowly, bit by bit, his words began to spill out. He told her about his father's strict routines, how every morning had to start at 5 a.m. sharp, how silence during meals was a rule, and how any sign of disobedience led to hours of punishment. "He says it builds character," Ryan said one afternoon, staring blankly at the soil. "But I think he just hates being alone." Evelyn listened quietly, her heart tightening. She tried to reassure him that things would get better, but he shook his head. "You don't know him," he whispered. "You don't know what he's like when the lights go out." Those words haunted her. A few evenings later, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ryan spoke again, this time in a trembling voice. "Sometimes I hear things at night, arguing, but it's not my dad talking to himself. There's another voice, a woman's voice. I hear her crying, whispering his name." He looked up at Evelyn, eyes wide with fear. "But there's no one else living there." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She wanted to believe it was his imagination, some trick of the mind from too much stress, but something inside her warned otherwise. "Ryan," she said gently, "have you told anyone else about this?" He shook his head. "No one would believe me. He's good at pretending. To everyone else, he's the perfect neighbor. The hero." Before she could respond, Mark's voice boomed across the street again, sharp and impatient. "Ryan, inside! Now!" Ryan jumped up like a soldier obeying a command. "I have to go," he whispered. Then, just before leaving, he looked at Evelyn and added in a near whisper, "Please don't tell him I said anything." As he disappeared into the house, Evelyn felt the first prickle of dread crawl up her spine. Something was deeply wrong behind those walls, and she feared that whatever it was, Ryan was trapped right in the middle of it. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The words Ryan had spoken replayed in her mind. There's another voice. A woman's voice. Every creak of the house made her uneasy. Every rustle of wind against the glass reminded her of something unseen, lurking in the dark. She told herself she was being foolish, that maybe Ryan was just a lonely boy inventing stories to make sense of his pain. But deep down she knew he wasn't lying. There was a tremor in his voice that only came from truth. Rain began to fall, light at first, then in heavy sheets that drummed against the windows. Lightning flashed across the street, illuminating Mark Crawford's house for just a second. And that was when Evelyn saw it. A shadow in Ryan's upstairs window, tall, still, too still. Her breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer to the glass, squinting through the rain. The shadow moved, slow, deliberate, and then vanished as the light flickered out. The room went completely dark. Evelyn's heart pounded. She looked again, but the figure was gone. The next morning, she tried to convince herself it was just Mark checking on his son, but something about it felt wrong. She decided to visit Ryan under the pretense of returning the apple basket he'd brought days earlier. When she knocked, it was Mark who answered. His smile was tight, forced, his eyes cold and assessing. "Good morning, Mark," Evelyn said politely. "Just bringing this back." "Ryan's been such a help in the garden lately." Mark's expression darkened. "Has he now?" he said, his tone laced with disapproval. "He should be focusing on school, not wasting time chatting over fences." Evelyn forced a small smile. "He's a good boy. Just needs someone to talk to sometimes." Mark's jaw tightened. "He has me," he said firmly, then closed the door before she could respond. Evelyn stood there for a moment, the sound of the latch clicking echoing like a warning. That night, she found a folded piece of paper in her mailbox. No name, no greeting, just Ryan's handwriting, shaky and uneven. "Please don't tell anyone what I said. I think someone's watching us." Even when Dad's asleep, her hands trembled as she read it. She looked toward the Crawfords' house. Every window was dark, the curtains drawn tight. But as she stared, she felt it, that prickling sensation of being observed. Her porch light flickered, casting long, uneasy shadows across the street. The following nights only deepened her fear. She would occasionally hear faint sounds, the scrape of something metallic, a muffled thud, once even what sounded like a woman's voice crying out before being abruptly silenced. Each time she told herself to call someone, but something always stopped her, the fear of sounding paranoid, of involving Ryan too soon, On the fifth night, unable to bear the tension any longer, Evelyn peered through her curtains again. In Ryan's window, the same flickering light appeared under, and this time she saw clearly. A hand, small, pale, pressed against the glass for a brief moment before vanishing into the dark. Evelyn's heart raced. Whoever, whatever, was inside that house, Ryan wasn't safe. And for the first time, she realized that whatever was happening there wasn't just a troubled family matter. It was something much darker, something that might soon spill beyond those walls. The storm returned 3 nights later, fierce and relentless, drenching the neighborhood in sheets of rain. Evelyn sat by her window, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The air was heavy, tense, almost electric, the kind of night where every sound felt sharper, every silence more dangerous. She hadn't seen Ryan for 2 days. His window had stayed dark, his yard eerily still. She tried to distract herself with tea and an old radio, but even the soft music couldn't drown out her worry. Around midnight, she thought she heard a faint cry. She turned down the volume. Nothing. Just the storm. She exhaled shakily, telling herself it was the wind. Then it came again, louder, desperate, a scream, high-pitched, piercing, human. Evelyn froze. It came from across the street, from Ryan's house. The kind of scream that could only come from pure terror. She dropped her cup, porcelain shattering across the floor, and ran to the window. Through the blur of rain and darkness, she saw the faint flicker of a light in the upstairs window. Ryan's room. The curtain was torn halfway open, and she thought she saw movement. A struggle, maybe. A figure stumbling backward. Then, suddenly, everything went black. Her instincts screamed to call the police. Her hands shook as she dialed, her voice trembling as she told the dispatcher what she'd heard. Within minutes, the faint echo of sirens pierced the storm. Red and blue lights soon reflected off the wet pavement, flashing wildly across her front lawn. Evelyn watched from her porch as officers rushed to the Crawfords' door. Mark appeared moments later, his face composed but pale. He spoke to the police briefly, gesturing calmly as if explaining away a misunderstanding. Evelyn strained to hear, but the rain swallowed their words. After what felt like an eternity, one of the officers approached her porch. "Ma'am," he said, "Mr. Crawford says everything's fine. His son isn't home, likely ran away after an argument. Have you seen him tonight?" Evelyn's mouth went dry. "No," she whispered. "But I heard him scream." The officer gave her a sympathetic look. "We'll keep an eye out. If he contacts you, call us immediately." Then he left, leaving her in the cold drizzle, disbelief churning in her stomach. Run away? No, she knew Ryan. He wouldn't just vanish like that. Something had happened. The next morning, the police cars were gone, and Mark was outside sweeping rainwater off his driveway like nothing had occurred. Evelyn wanted to confront him, to scream, "Where is your son?" But she didn't dare. That afternoon, she found a note in her flower pot. The writing was faint, the paper damp from the rain, but the message was unmistakable. "If something happens to me, look under the old oak tree." Her breath caught. The oak tree stood in the far corner of the Crawfords' backyard, its roots gnarled and deep. That night, when the neighborhood slept, Evelyn took a flashlight, pulled on her raincoat, and crossed the street. The mud clung to her shoes as she knelt beneath the tree. She dug with trembling hands until her fingers struck something hard. A small, rusted tin box. Inside was a torn photograph, Ryan, his mother, and a woman she didn't recognize, and a flash drive wrapped carefully in plastic. Evelyn stared at it, heart pounding. Whatever was on that drive, it was the truth Ryan wanted her to find. And now, she feared, it might be the reason he was gone. Evelyn barely slept that night. The storm had passed, but her thoughts raged like thunder in her mind. The small, rusted tin box sat on her kitchen table beneath the dim glow of a single bulb. The torn photograph inside, Ryan, his mother, and a strange woman, stared back at her like a silent accusation. But it was the flash drive that drew her attention most. It felt heavy, as if it carried not just files, but the weight of everything that had gone wrong inside that house. She didn't own a computer, but her old friend Tom, a retired teacher who lived 2 blocks away, did. Early the next morning, she wrapped the flash drive in a cloth and hurried to his home. He listened quietly as she explained, his brow furrowed with concern. "You're saying the boy's missing, and this is what he left you?" Evelyn nodded. "Please, Tom, whatever's on it, I need to know." Tom inserted the drive into his laptop. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared labeled simply, "For Evelyn." Her heart clenched. Tom double-clicked it, and a series of video files popped up, each with a date spanning months. The first video showed Ryan sitting in his dimly lit room. His face looked tired, eyes shadowed. "If you're watching this," he said quietly, "it means something happened. I need someone to know the truth." He looked off-screen nervously before continuing. "My dad isn't who everyone thinks he is." Evelyn's chest tightened. The next few clips were shaky, secretly recorded. One showed Mark arguing with a woman in the kitchen, not Ryan's mother, but the same woman from the photo. She looked terrified, whispering something before he grabbed her arm roughly and shoved her out of frame. In another video, Ryan whispered into the camera, "He says she left, but I heard her scream that night." Evelyn covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Tom's hand trembled as he clicked the final file. It began with Ryan setting the camera down on his desk. "I'm going to confront him tonight," he said, his voice breaking. "He thinks I don't know what happened to Mom, but I do. I found her bracelet behind the shed." He swallowed hard. "If this is my last video, please, Mrs. Turner, don't let him get away with it." The footage cut to Ryan walking down a dark hallway. A door opened and Mark's voice thundered, "What are you doing with that camera?" The image jerked. The sound of a struggle echoed, and then silence. The video ended there. Evelyn sat frozen, horror gripping her heart. She finally understood what Ryan had tried to tell her. Mark had done something terrible, not just to his wife, but possibly to Ryan too. "Evelyn," Tom said quietly, "we need to take this to the police right now." But before she could answer, a sharp noise echoed from the front of the house, the sound of glass shattering. The two exchanged terrified looks. Someone was inside. Evelyn's blood ran cold. There was only one person who could be desperate enough to come searching for that flash drive. Mark Crawford knew. And now, he knew where she was. The sound of shattering glass froze Evelyn where she stood. For a heartbeat, she and Tom didn't move, both listening, barely breathing. Then came the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on broken glass. Someone was in the house. Tom motioned for her to stay still as he crept toward the hallway, a flashlight in one hand, a heavy wrench in the other. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her trembling hands clutched the flash drive. It was the proof, the evidence of everything Ryan had tried to reveal. And now someone wanted it back. "Tom?" she whispered. Before he could answer, a voice came from the shadows, low, steady, and chillingly familiar. "Evelyn." Her blood turned to ice. Mark Crawford stepped into the light, rainwater dripping from his coat, eyes cold and wild. His calm, neighborly mask was gone. In its place was something raw and dangerous. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," he said. "You had no idea what you were doing." Tom raised the wrench. "Get out before I call the police." Mark gave a bitter laugh. "The police? You think they'll listen to a grieving father? My son ran away, remember?" He took a slow step closer. "Hand me the drive, Evelyn. You don't want to end up like them." Her stomach dropped. Them. That one word confirmed everything. "What did you do to Ryan?" she demanded, her voice breaking. Mark's expression flickered. A flash of guilt, then fury. He wouldn't stop digging. He thought he could expose me. But he didn't understand. None of them did. "Expose you for what?" Tom barked. Mark's voice cracked as he shouted, "She was going to leave me!" His breathing quickened. His mother. She was going to take him, destroy everything I built. I just wanted to stop her from ruining our lives. "It was an accident!" Evelyn shook her head in disbelief. "And the other woman?" Mark's eyes shifted. She knew too much. I couldn't let her talk. The confession hung heavy in the air, terrible and final. Evelyn realized he wasn't just confessing to her, he was unraveling, desperate, trying to justify the unjustifiable. Tom, seizing the moment, discreetly pressed record on his phone. "It's over, Mark," he said firmly. "You've said enough." Mark's eyes darted between them, realization dawning. "You—" he began, but Tom swung the wrench, knocking him off balance long enough for Evelyn to grab the phone and the flash drive. They fled through the back door as sirens wailed in the distance. Tom had managed to trigger the emergency alarm before Mark broke in. Minutes later, police cars surrounded the street. Mark was dragged from the house, shouting incoherently about betrayal and lies. As he was shoved into the back of a patrol car, his voice broke into a hoarse cry. "He was my son! He was supposed to understand." Evelyn stood on the curb, soaked by the rain, shaking with exhaustion and grief. In her pocket, the flash drive felt like a burning weight, the voice of a boy who had trusted her when no one else did. Days later, the police confirmed what Evelyn already feared. Ryan's body had been found, buried beneath the old oak tree. His final act, leaving her that message, had brought justice to light. Months passed, and the neighborhood slowly returned to its quiet routine. But for Evelyn, everything had changed. Every evening she sat once more on her porch, the same spot where Ryan had first sat beside her, watching the sun dip behind the trees. She kept a small photo of him framed on the table beside her teacup.